And now we are back. Please go ahead, get in your seats, heart, and share the show. We have some more talking shit to go. That's right. Let's go ahead and join us as Angified presents Talking Shh I.T with Glenn and Tony.
Thank you, Angie.
Ooh, we got some extra in there that time.
Some extras, indeed. I changed things up a little bit while we were gone. I set up the
Oh, nice.
the other keyboard. I don't know if
Oh,
you
I
remember this one.
like the keyboard view. Yeah.
Not sure if you remember this one over here, but this is the Casio. So we have the Casio CTK 611 right here, 61 key keyboard, and I hooked it up to the.
Got some beats in those.
I'm not sure how the volume is. Make sure that's not too loud and all. But that's hooked up to the Meticulous now. I just took the same outputs that I had hooked up to the main piano and brought them over to here and had it that way. And yeah, it has some beats, and I have the volume for those at like 60%. Like, nice. Christmas time.
I don't know the other part. See, now when you hear a beat like that, where do you end up wanting to start?
See, I'm thinking A minor and G, and kind of bouncing back and forth. And the question is, you got to come in as a bounce back and forth, kind of more laid back, a little bit like. It's like the bounce between the bottom note and the top two.
Oh, I see. Now I'm starting to think like you as a bassist.
Yep.
Getting those filler notes.
And for me, it's like trying to leave a lot of space, but filling in what you need to, just to get the. Because for me, it always used to be tricky to try to figure out what to play besides just playing the root all the time or just playing certain phrases all the time. So just little exercises like this where I would try to play minimally, but just playing like little bursts, even if it's little bursts of, doodle-doo, like a couple of notes at a time.
See, and that doesn't sound minor to me.
Right. The A is the minor and then the G is the major. That's the thing, we're going between those two. So it's kind of going between like a 6 and a 5. Is what it feels like to me.
That's what I keep hearing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to do it on the acoustic.
That's the part that hooks you in, and then again that little doo-doo-doo, like every once in a while, getting that little hook in every couple times around just really keeps that moving. And that's the beat called reggae in here, which works out nicely at 150 BPM. One thing I also like a lot about this keyboard is I forgot it has these. How loud is that?
Sounds good.
Those are the 6 buttons on the top here. So these are basically, I had forgotten I had a.
Oh, nice. Dedicated drum pads?
Dedicated drum pads.
Yeah, see, I'd rather be playing them that way than with the keyboard mappings. I hate the way drums get mapped on keyboards. It's doesn't feel natural, you know, where they put the bass and the snare. Those are easy enough, but all the other drums are mapped in weird ways. Could
What I was saying
never
about
get comfortable with it.
the way I did the drums for the worm track is I was saying I have my drum controller right here. I think you can see the symbol here, right? I'm grabbing.
Yeah.
Like this is the hi-hat. So like I just rotate this way and I'm playing drums over here. But this is that tiny little kit has those snares down here. Cymbals are up over there. But with that, it's a lot more motion, and it feels like it would be a lot easier to just like do it over here, you know?
I was going to say, even on the drum pad, I'd rather be playing with my hands than with sticks.
Yeah. And it just comes in like, if you double up like that, sometimes there you get a problem. And it's also, it's not like pressure sensitive, so no matter how hard you hit it or how soft you hit it, it's always going to be that same tone. So
see, these new MIDI controllers, like these new ones, the M Audios and the Akais and the Nova stations, the pads that they're coming with, nice pressure sensitive pads.
Nice. And the thing I would say is like with that is I would still be able to input a part this way, but then I would make sure to go in and either humanize just to get an overall starting point where it's not all the same, and then adjust from there, or go in and just manually adjust each of the hits to different.
Yeah, give a little variance to the bass and the snare.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And even on the timing, like it doesn't always have to be perfectly on time, but it shouldn't be so far out of whack that it pulls everything on.
Belligerently out of time.
Yeah, exactly. It should go with the groove, you know. It should assist and aid with the way the song's going. But yeah, I do love the fact that this has all those, you know, rhythms built in and all the different instruments. I had forgotten that I think last time we had hooked it up with just a 1/4 inch. So all I had was the audio output and I wasn't getting the ridiculous because we didn't have the MIDI.
Oh, you got it through the Uno now.
So now, exactly. I pulled the Uno connections from the piano into this. So now this is hooked up to the 1/4 inch for the audio as well as being hooked up for the MIDI there. So this would also audio as bringing it out that way. That way we can see it there too.
Another nice thing with today's modern MIDI controllers, you don't end up needing to get a separate MIDI interface. Like those Unos and, you know, the USB MIDI interfaces are not as necessary nowadays because all these controllers are, the USB is the MIDI interface.
The other one I can just barely not reach, but it's over there.
Even with your giant arms?
It's like I could, but I'd be leaning over the guitar and the bass and other things to get to it. So yeah, probably no. But you've seen it. It's the other keyboard. I can't think of the name of it even. All it is though is the basic MIDI controller with just the 2 wheels, like the pitch and the mod wheel, and like a couple of MIDI buttons and just interface.
Has no speakers, no built-in sound engine,
no built-in sounds, no speakers. It's literally just a way to get stuff in.
And that's the more common controller these days. I mean, if you really want to get a nice keyboard with some triggers for under $100, don't worry about the synthesizer. Worry about the controller.
Carbon C61. That's what it is.
Oh, M Audio.
Yeah.
They make Carbon
C61. Yep. And that being C61 would be a 61 key keyboard. This is the 611, so this would be a 61 key keyboard. And then, I think the piano is the full size. But I feel like an octave and a half. I mean, 2 octaves. It doesn't need to be a lot in order to get things done. So if you have
the majority of what I play is. That's the majority of the area that I tend to be in.
Yep. And if you were doing
if I was
solo
to slide
stuff,
that, on the piano side, I'm either there or I'm here.
It's going for, that's the rhythm. So instead I was looking for the sound, the tone, because that was the grand piano. Because it's actually a better piano than the other one I had. Yeah. And I think a lot of it depends on the way you hit. Also, you got to come into it.
Yeah, and if you really do need to go like that extra octave in either direction, they do make it pretty simple, like one button, boom, shift an octave down.
The 61s, you can get all
Yeah,
the
that's got a
there,
nice high end. It's pretty damn close to the Rollins.
Changes right there though from that top A flat to G. Gets metallic.
Yeah, that's where some of these samples, you know, when you go really high, that's the highest on mine. And it is a little thin, you know, and then on the flip side, when you go really low, you know, it gets a little mushy. The piano samples tend to stabilize like at the 76th key, you know, right around there. It's where it starts to actually sound like the instrument.
And like you said, like on the high end, like if you just go the next 3 octaves, like that whole range right there is all pretty much gold.
Could make a song off of that.
It's called C.
I see music, literally.
Join us next week when we do a song called
And that's pure octave.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Always a bonus. And that's where again on this the piano sound is definitely one of those where I kind of have to get the feel back for whether I'm doing the weighted keyboard or the plastic keys, because there's definitely a big difference in feel. And sometimes it's easy, like with the plastic keys, it's easy to sound like you're just like stomping on the keys and blah 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 blah.
Well, the plastic keys sometimes help more actually for the flowing.
Yeah,
it's funny. Sometimes it's easier for me to arpeggiate with the plastic keyboard because these weighted keys really do take some conditioning. I'm just used to it because piano was my first real instrument. Mm-hmm. Synth was secondary.
Now let's say, for example, you were trying to play some keys in a metal song. What kinds of things, like one thing that's common would be in Phrygian, but we could play in, say,
E minor. It's the
say,
first one, I think.
E minor is a good choice because that would lead towards E Phrygian, which is something that they would probably be working in. So that would be a good start. So but was it like a lot of fast hitting or arpeggiating, or more just comping, like little chords, or what kinds of things are you focusing towards?
I try to go for like a bounce, you know, like the same way the guitars tend, like
get the chug happening. Yeah. In a piano sound, or do you go for different types of?
I don't tend to use a piano sound if I'm trying to do a metal track, unless I'm trying to do like, you know, okay, if I was gonna try to do a metal song with piano, I'd probably go with like something like one that I did. And then bring in the. And then, you know, basically hope that there's some guitars back there going dun 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 dun.
Yeah. And actually, that's a good question. Is that I'm not even sure how the guitars sound on here. I do like the way that the piano comes through, and I think that would probably be more their focus. But for that, what would you think?
Casios tend to have nice acoustic guitars. Their electric guitars a little thin, but
I was going to say between the distorted guitar or the overdriven guitar, or the muted or the clean or the jazz, a few different options. See about the overdriven. Go with that one, and coming in with something. A little bit sharp, but not too bad. And it also depends how you use them. Like whether it's like really in the face like that, or whether it's more just kind of chirping in, just to add something additional to whatever else is going on. So that was the overdrive. What was the other one I mentioned? The distorted.
Yeah, sometimes the electric guitars too.
Yeah, the distorted guitar is much sharper.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a brass.
Yep. Oh, this one also doesn't have. This one doesn't have the pitch or bottom wheel. What it does have is pitch bend buttons. So, like if I hit a C, or well, you're doing A, right? So let's do the A pitch bend. So I can use it to like bend down like that.
We're gonna write a metal song, Glenn.
Oh, I think I got some metal bass happening for that. With picked bass, I'm thinking 034. Not a lot of attitude to it, but it is.
It's got some punch.
Appropriate. And that's where actually maybe even a percussive organ. Once you get down to the bottom on that one, it's a little bit too low for that patch, I think. That bass. That's not too bad.
Yeah, again, nice punch.
Mm-hmm.
Basses tend to get simulated better on the keyboard.
They're also assuming you're going to stay in a tight range, probably. So, like, as you go way up high, like that doesn't sound very bassy. But at the same time, it can get interesting when you do take instruments out of their natural range. But yeah, you'll find some that have a narrower range. But it's good to be able to represent it well on the keyboard here.
There we
being
go.
able to
Contrabasso works nice against that.
Yeah.
Now I can work with that.
Little slide here and there. What I always liked is the drawbar organ.
Oh yeah. Organ's another one that, with the right keyboards like Casio, fantastic organs.
Too low, maybe. That's nice.
My organs are hot. Let's go Deep Purple.
So not a reggae beat, right? What kind of beat? What kind of beat are we thinking? Are we looking at metal? So the closest they have waltz. No, maybe something.
That really does have that Deep Purple sound.
Polka.
And surprisingly, that's an organ, not a guitar.
I consider it dance or funk, so that's good.
This one's called Smoked Water.
Smoked water.
Really good simulation of the Deep Purple organ.
So hard rock, 150 BPM.
No, that's metal. That's not hard rock at that tempo.
How about 130? Oh, it almost has a. I'm feeling a little Van Halen with that. Faster, slower, same. Let's try like maybe 120.
See, that's a tempo that'll get you in a groove.
Absolutely. Try that. 44. This one says heavy metal. What speed do you think their idea of heavy metal should be?
You know, at this point, if I'm hearing a beat like that, I just try to feel my groove into the tempo.
Nice. This is that 120, so this is probably slower than they intend for a heavy metal tempo, but we'll see.
Well, 120 to me feels like a heartbeat almost. Just to mix it up. Oh, you're going into A major, huh?
That's the question. So I was thinking it should be like Phrygian. Is that better than
It's a little more melodic.
Just thinking that if they're doing metal, they might be coming in. You're trying to go with A minor, they would probably be coming in with that Phrygian stiff. But that's the flat two there to get there from the minor instead of, which would be the minor, be the Phrygian, and B flat.
Yeah, that little E flat shift really does change.
That B flat. Otherwise, if you were just playing minor, it could be either way.
This thing's got me thinking Deep Purple.
Let's see, they had a couple in in that neighborhood. We got heavy metal, we had riff rock, we had 50s rock. I think those are going to be very different. Let's try riff rock and see what that seems like. And how about we go to G major. And a little 1-4-5 sort of a thing. Very common.
Where are you going after the G?
Let's go up to the C. I went with the inversion of the C. Then you go up to the D.
Then to then 1-4-5.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And just moving around like that.
Oop. Forgot I was in G major.
Sneaking around on different keys out there. And that was riff rock. So got a couple different options that are pretty good with the built-in ones. And then of course, you can always bang in your own beats this way as well. And by hooking it up with the MIDI, that would be a good way for me to do that, as a matter of fact, because I had been doing the drums over here just using USB direct and playing that way and playing with sticks, but my drumming is still nowhere near ready up to playing with a band standard type of thing.
So I couldn't. Sticks is the reason why I'm not a good drummer. I think I could be a good bongo player, or a hand drummer. I feel comfortable. I have rhythm with my hands. Sticks totally changes the rhythm approach for me.
Yeah, it changes the equation completely.
I don't have good timing when I'm holding these toothpicks.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now the one video that we were talking about earlier about the huge cinematic chords. Remember we were talking about the Hans Zimmer chords, and we were talking about
filling out the chord.
Yeah, like if you just took a little triad, a little C major triad, and you filled it out with another lower C, and then an even lower C, which really fills it out. The other thing you can add is G's. So if I had another G, like over there. Double any of the thirds, like whichever one we had as the third, that's the only one. That's the one thing that's different. Like you keep that as by itself, but you can double the roots, you double the fives, and you fill out the chord that way. And you can change the orchestration, like you were saying, with when you're setting up MIDI parts. You cello on this one and a bass on that one, and it could be a horn section, a tuba on this one, whatever, to get a different sound layering happening. But using those,
that's why it's nice to think.
Tones.
And again, this is where theory and understanding of like classical composition, quartets, is a great thing to understand when you really do want to understand 4-part melody. Because the whole quartet approach is to fill out the chord across 4 instruments, whether it's strings or
brass. It would help you write for vocals as well, because that's the kind of thing that they would try to do with vocal harmonies.
Acapella.
Yeah.
Barbershop.
Yeah, exactly. Getting 4 voices together like that, definitely. If you even have just 3, then you can work in all the triads and you can get the main feeling of the chords out. But when you get 4, it gets magical, because all of a sudden you can do all of those extended chords where you can do all those things we talked about before, whether it's voice leading or whether it's moving a bass line to get that feel going.
Yeah, those singers that learn, with a choral background, singers who start, with choir mentality, they learn the importance of alto, soprano, tenor, and what's the other? Baritone.
Barry. Yep.
Alto, Barry. Tenor, soprano.
Alto, tenor, sax.
Yeah, I always think sax. That's how I remember them. But it applies to choral vocals. You know, that choir teacher, when she first gets a new student, what she would do, she'd figure out where you fit in the choir.
The range, yeah.
And
That's
then
what I've
taught
wondered about.
you to sing for those parts.
Yep. And that's like, I don't think they write a lot of parts for where my voice would fit. Like in those equations, like to try to find the lowest note, I would just sit there and try to sing, you know, have somebody sing a note that's like down near the bottom of their range, like one of their bottom 3 or 4 notes that they can sing, a singer, you know, and have them start there and start walking down, and I'll walk down with them and then see if I can keep going from there, you know.
Yeah, usually the like baritone vocal melodies, they're the ones that like will drop down like a step, or, you know, go up like a step, you know, like a bass line would. And then you got those sopranos that are just like riffing up in the high end.
Exactly. That's the way that works. Let me do, I think we still have and sharing. Is that possible? No, let me do that.
No.
All right, so let me bring up the video that we talked about there. Again, it was for the huge cinematic chords and how you're filling them out with the roots, multiplying and that sort of a thing. And I believe, I don't remember if we did, I'm trying to remember which video we did from him before, but we'll see if you guys recognize. This was from Matthias.
Oh, look at that tiny
Matthias Holmgren.
Cute.
And let's get that going here. Let me know if the volume is okay here. We're going to try it about halfway.
Cinematic chords like your favorite Hollywood producer Hans Zimmer and John Williams. Today I'm going to show you how you can take this really tiny, small, regular piano chord progression sounding like this. And make it sound like this. Right, my name is Matthias, and if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe. Let's take the tour. Okay, so begin by booting up your favorite sequencer, and for this demo I'm going to use Bitwig Studio. And we need to plot down our chords, and the chords are as follows: A minor, F major, and a D minor to an E major. It's totally fine if you don't play keyboard, because you can always program these sequences.
A life plagued with constipation, diarrhea, bloating, inflammation, and an unhealthy metabolic system is...
So let's enter the
That's
piano
how
roll
you fill
here
out your
and begin
chords.
by fleshing out the chord around C4 in the piano roll. Our first chord is the A minor, A, C and E. Our next chord is the F major. So we just skip every second white note in this case. So F, A and C, and then we have the D minor, D, F, A. And then our final chord is the E major, so E, G sharp and B. And now this is a little bit too fast, so we'll make these chords double in length like this. So making chords epic is really not just about the chords themselves, but it's rather about how you arrange the notes in these chords, because these are really simple chords. It's just triads. So what can we do to make this more cinematic before we move on and move the notes to the strings? So maybe move down these the bass note here, an octave. So we select all the bass notes and let's double them and drag them down an octave. So now we basically have this. But we want to thicken this up even more, so let's hold Alt and drag these down another octave, so we have doubled the bass here. So we have the basses, the orchestral basses, and the orchestral cellos playing this A2. Or maybe even drag this down another octave so we have even fatter and more spread out notes in our arrangement. The next step here is to make something called the voice leading, and that is that we make a more smoother transition between the notes in these chords, between these chords. So if we look here, we can see that the C exists both in our A minor and in our F major. So that's totally fine to let that C continue and play in the F chord. And the same thing here with the A, but the F here, maybe we can move that up an octave because it will be closer to the top E here in our first chord. And the same thing with our next chord, the D minor here, the D, F and A. Let's move up the D here an octave, so it's closer to the C, and let's move this F up an octave, so it's closer to the previous F in the F chord. And that final chord, let's move the E up an octave. So now we have a much smoother transition between these chords, and it will sound much better when it's performed, and it's also easier to play by the string players if you're going to have string players playing your arrangement at a later state. Of course, there's all these rules in orchestral arrangement and harmonization. And one of them is that it's totally fine to double the root note of your chord. So maybe we can make use of that. So let's continue here and double up this the A of the A minor, an octave above here. So we have more of this A playing, and the same thing for our F chord. Let's double the F here an octave. Maybe that's a little bit too high, but there's also okay to double the fifth. But it's less common that you double the third because it's already so strong in the chord. So maybe let's double the C here instead. Which is the fifth, the C is the fifth in the F chord. You have F, A and C. And in our D minor, let's double the D an octave. And in our final E major chord, we can double the E. So now we have a very fat arrangement here with the chords spread out, and we have a very nice voice leading in the core of our chord progression. And we also have these really fat basses playing in the bass section. It's a good practice not to make closed chord voicings in the low end of your tracks, because your songs will sound very muddy. That's why we have this really lush and wide spread between the notes in the low end. Right, so let's see how that sounds with our strings. And for the strings I am using the Sign Player with the Metropolis Arc 5 orchestral library. And we have the high strings large patch and the low strings large with some winds blended in. So let's move down our piano sketch to the strings, the string track. So you can hear we have instantly a very epic sound from that simple chord progression. And now we can continue and add some dynamic expression to make this even more dynamic and wild, because as of now all the chords is playing in the same sustained velocity and dynamic expression. But with this patch we can actually have a very low dynamic and go to a more strong dynamic. So let's begin small and build. And I'm controlling the dynamic expression with the mod wheel here on this key step, Arturia key step 37. And now let's open up the automation lane so we can see that mod ride I did on the dynamics expression. And now to add this final spice on this piece, we need to add some epic choirs. And we will add that from the sign player,
spice.
Metropolis Arc 1, and the choirs. The Victorian female choir, sustains, and the Aurora male choir, also the sustains patch. But let's begin with the female top line. So let's double this note clip to our female choir track. And just get rid of all these lower notes. And all these top notes. So now we get rid of all these other notes and only let the top line be featured on this voice track. And now we heard that these two notes are out of range, so we can just move them down an octave.
Here's where the journey starts. Everything is within your comfort zone, but then something happened, and it is
Let's hear how that sounds with our strings. Now it's a good practice to avoid these kind of large leaps in your melody lines. Well, you can have these kind of large leaps in your basses, but for your melody lines, violas and violins, you try to avoid these kind of leaps and have a more smooth melody line. Instead of beginning on this A up here, we can begin with the fifth of the A minor, which is the E, and go from E to an F, because we have the F in the F major chord, and then the D is of course in the D minor, and the E is the root note of the final E chord. And of course you can experiment here with creating your own melodies as the top line, but we can keep this the E, F and A to the G sharp. Now we need to add some male choirs to fatten up that mid-range. So we make another duplicate of this chord track, hold in Alt and drag this to our male choir track. So on this track we have the Aurora male choir from Metropolis Arc 1. So it's a really, really nice fat choir. So let's enter this piano roll and get rid of those really low notes and get rid of this top line and only have these mid chords left. And let's hear how that sounds in solo. And that's too high for the male choir, so let's move that down an octave. And that's of course much nicer. And since we copied that previous track, which already has this dynamic expression mod wheel ride, the mod wheel automation, we also have the automation for this track already prepared for us. So now we can just play back this track with all these nice little choirs and strings. Right, so that's actually all there is to it. You take your small piano chord progression and lay out the notes around C4 on the piano roll. Next step is to double up the bass notes and do it in octaves, and make sure you have a large spread between the notes, because if you have close voicings in the bass area you will have a muddy sound. Then move around the notes between the chords so you have a smoother transition between each chord part. And finally duplicate some of those notes to make a melody line on the top of the chord. And the final tip for a really bombastic sound is to add some choirs on top, so you can have a lead vocal by a female choir and maybe add some male choirs in the core of the chord. Now I'd like to know what your secret trick is to make your music and songs more epic. Please let me know in the comments. As always, if you like this video, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Now, if you want...
All right.
I like him.
Matthias?
I like him. What's his YouTube?
Yep. It's on my other screen there. Matthias Holmgren.
Matthias? Uh, his tip there on the modulation to the modulation wheel for the
Exactly.
male vocals,
Mm-hmm.
that was a I've always wondered how some of these cinematographers, you know, the soundtrack guys, are getting those choirs to swoop in like that. And he made it look so simple.
Exactly.
And I like
That was-
how, you know, he starts with the 4-part template. And then as he's breaking down the other instruments he wants to use, duplicate the 4-part template, shave off the parts that aren't relevant.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then, as you saw, he dealt with like the very top line for those voices, and he dealt with the middle line for those other ones. And then you can always take that, you know, same approach and take that bottom layer and do things with the bottom layer as well. And make that, you know, the different instruments down the bottom.
And he made a good
brass
point
or
about
strings.
certain instruments like violas and cellos, and, you know, big jumps when you're trying to do a melody. These aren't the ones where you really, if you do that, you're looking for a very unusual kind of sound. You don't want to jump with those instruments like that. His variation there, rather than going down with that big jump, going up and just a slight pullback, was a slick way to get the same notes he wanted without that big jump effect that he was getting.
Exactly. Very cool.
And that progression, I know that one.
Nice.
Listen to your heart. Roxette.
There you go, yeah. Could be a lot of different songs, right?
Oh yeah, it is a whole bunch of them. Matter of fact, Heart is also, I think, has one.
There's a variation, yeah.
And his whole approach of making it cinematic, you know, fattening it up, and thinking of the other instruments. I would love to do, you know, soundtrack work, and that kind of mentality is what you have to have.
Yeah, and again, that leads right back to the emotion part. Like again, the you know, being able to feel the scene and see what it needs. Does it need tension? Does it need, you know, drama? Does it need to, you know,
a swell,
you know, something going along with it? Whatever. There's, you know, anything that it needs. You know, even if it's footsteps, you know, there's going to be some kind of atmospheric. How much reverb, how much echo on those footsteps, right? Is it a tunnel or is it out somewhere else? You know, all that kind of thing.
He was kind of like, you know, shooting for that Hans Zimmer sound, which means you're thinking like male choir, female choir dynamics. That was a big key when he did that, is what gave it that Zimmer sound, because that's, you know, that's what he does.
Yeah. Like you said, I really did like that.
And those male choirs nowadays, man, that sampler he's using there, I love the male choir sound that comes with that one.
Yeah.
It's funny that like the male choirs are sounding better on the samplers than the female ones are kind of tough sometimes, because you really have a small range on some of the female samples. You can't go too high. You heard what happened when he went too high with it.
Yeah, well, there are some that are, you know, a slightly more narrow range, whether it's vocals or whether, you know, or whether it's other instruments, like we were talking about even before with some of the bass instruments. You know, only a certain range of the keyboard is their sweet spot, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it's just anything outside that, it really doesn't fit with that particular style.
Yeah, that's the kind of instrument where you will see a limited range in some of the samplers. Basses, certain choirs, even on certain strings. Strings usually sample pretty good, but they don't sound good when you go too far. They'll let you play on the sampler at those lower and higher. They just don't sound good.
Yeah, forgot to check the strings here. Not bad. Nice.
Hey, Shmuley.
How you doing, Shmuley?
How's it going down under?
Oh, not much, man. Slept in like a motherfucker. because I'm used to this. Not used to this daylight saving stuff.
Yeah,
Neither am I. And it's been 3 weeks and I still haven't adjusted.
Legit though, right?
Wait, there's actually daylight out there? Like, I don't go out there to go see that.
Yeah, I
mean,
thought you
here-
Australians were always in the dark.
What do you mean? We're always burning underneath the sun.
But you got a bevy, so you're good. Got a beverage.
I was just watching you guys do some piano work there. It's pretty cool. Love just listening to you guys. Just
Yeah, Glenn
I
showing us
popped
how to
in.
fatten up our sound.
Yep, fatten it up.
Yeah.
Big chords. Even bigger.
It's nice when I can follow the keyboard.
Yeah. The meticulous. I like that. And again, yours is very cool too. The C music. I like the way that it shows the trails on the notes. It's
Well,
much
yeah, this
more
one's
of,
pretty, but it's not practical. Unless
it's
you're
more the Guitar
really
Hero
paying
style.
attention.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you were hitting like a low octave, like I can see what you're hitting. Like if you hit G's down there, I would see them on the coming up on the screen and be like, oh
Yeah,
what
I like with this approach is that like if you're bouncing, you can kind of visually see. You are stuck on that AG, huh?
Keeping it simple.
We're gonna get Schmorley singing choir.
It looks like we're interrupting him. He's got something going on right there. Got to do that. Make it happen. A and the G, the A minor. Yeah, I definitely like that one, man. And that's one that I think it's just the fact that it's back and forth between a major and a minor that I always like that one a lot because it goes back and forth to like if anybody just walked in right at that moment when it's on the major, it's happy. If they walked in right at the moment when it's minor, it's sad. But it's both, so it's right back and forth. So I kind of like that a lot. It's got a good feel.
And I do like the major minor dynamics. I'm okay with having a song use both for the during the song.
It's a pretty good dynamic that makes it supreme. Angie's invited me to another room. Catch you later.
Sweet, man.
Oh, you got called to the principal's office.
Good to see you, legend. Another one that goes back and forth nice is a 2-5, because that was one where like in jazz you see a lot of times the a turnaround 2-5-1. So like if you were playing in the key of let's say C major for a starting home bass, if you were doing a 2-5-1, we'd be doing a minor, a D minor, and then a G major, and then C. It'd be a 2-5. That feel to it as it evolves. And then if you just skip that 1 at the end and you just go back and forth between the 2 and the 5, it can kind of bounce back and forth because it always wants to go to that 1, but it doesn't mind not going there if you just keep going back and forth between that 2 and the 5.
Yeah, that too really does add an unusual flavor to start with.
We're essentially starting out kind of Dorian, the D Dorian kind of feel. Another thing we can introduce into there is an A minor right after that D. So starting from that D, like you do the D and then the A minor, and then the G, and then the C.
And the G. So if this is the 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is the
6.
6.
And then the 5.
5. Oh, it does resolve nice.
That's one of the ones I like a lot also. Anything that involves the 2, the 6, the 1, and the 5. And that's partially because on the guitar or on the bass, those chords just turn into a nice little pattern where you're, like I was talking about before, where you're just dropping down a string and then going up 2 frets down and then dropping down a string again. It just turns into a little box. So it's easy to transfer from this one to that one to this one to that one.
And it even feels good on the keyboard side. I mean,
Yeah.
depending on the inversion you use. I mean, if I was good to go crazy and just do like flat root chords, a little trickier. Got a kind of a jump there from the 2 to the 6 if you're just doing straight root chords.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of a jump.
And that's where the orchestration discussion from before, like what he was talking about before with the leading tones or moving things from this octave to here. And that's where seeing it actually on the piano roll, the way he was working with the song, like seeing it out in front of you, you can see how much of a jump it is. And it's like, yeah, it looks too far. So maybe we either, move it an octave or pick a tone, like instead of that root note to pick a 5th, because.
And with arrangements like that, knowing chord inversions, after you get done learning chords, triads, most important first thing to learn in music theory. After that, chord inversions is where everything starts to open up, because starting this way, starting that way, all lead in a different direction.
And again, for me, the big thing with the inversions is especially things like if you're doing a 1-4-5 again, let's say in the key of C, just to keep it easy, instead of starting with the root position of the C and then jumping up to the 4 and 5, then those 2 are right next to each other. So maybe keep those 2 and then the C, use the C up here, where you're using second inversion of the C. So you can go from that 4-5-1, for example. There's a nice little upwards walk because you're using that C chord at the end, you're doing G at the bottom of it. So G, C, E. And the whole thing feels like it's walking up and resolving at the same time.
Yeah, actually starting with the root like that with the C, and then going up to the 4, and then to the 5, and then doing the next C with the second inversion is a nice stair step.
Yep. What about it and using a third or the second inversion or the first inversion in there somewhere as well? You could always do, where you walk from before the F.
Yeah, it sounds nice when the C goes up like that. It has a rising feel and very bright. Like that's the shit they played on Sundays in the old days.
Now, another thing that you can do is that's to try to get everything working as smoothly as possible. At the same time, you can work down at the other end in the deep end and try to make it sound as opposed as possible. So you want the bass to basically,
so instead of going up, go
jump,
down.
Go as much of a jump as you can with the bass, instead of trying to make them all right next to each other. You're trying to bounce from a low to a high or a high to a low or whatever. Yeah, and that spreads it out.
Oh yeah, if you go down with the C instead of up. Oh, with the C going up with the right hand and with the left hand going in the resolving in the opposite direction, it has a nice rise fall. That C on the low end just complements that high C inverted.
And it's a good way to be able to have motion in your song, motion up or motion down.
Yeah, some of that parallel motion that
without changing the progression that you're doing, because you're still in the same chords and all that.
Yeah, that video we watched a couple of weeks ago on was it contrasting motion?
Contrary motion?
Contrary motion, yeah.
Yeah. Parallel motion, contrary motion, and no motion if it's staying together. Good stuff.
Well, I always liked the counter motion approach when I was learning all the classical stuff. That was a big thing in the Bach days, where the composers were purposely trying to mess with your ears, up down on both sides.
And what key are we in?
Yeah. And how fast can I play through it?
Trying to mess you up in multiple ways. Now I have one here for the guitar folks that we have here tonight. And this is one about what any guitarist can learn from Bob Weir.
Bob Weir.
I think that's a
A
good
lot to learn from.
This is from Jeff Williams Guitar. So let's check and see how that one is. We haven't checked a guitar one yet here tonight. But we got to make sure everybody gets some love, right?
Oh, and you know these guitarists on BandLab, they're craving.
We're going to try about half volume again. Let me know how that is.
Most people would simply call Bob Weir the rhythm guitarist from the Grateful Dead, but he's so much more. We're going to take a look at what any guitarist can learn from him. And then we're not going to focus on copying Bob, but just learning his overall approach so you can apply it to your own playing. And I'm going to leave out a ton of stuff, but at the same time, we're still going to cover a lot and move real quick. So don't get overwhelmed. Just remember that it's an overview of his sounds. So what about Bob? We're going to use Going Down the Road Feeling Bad as a kind of a template to start real simple and build ourselves up looking at the complexities of what he does. So I know this is not even a Dead tune, but it's just a good example. It's just in the key of E. It's the same thing the whole time. It's just E, A, C sharp minor, and B. So we're going to look at it just in isolation, not even play through the progression, kind of save some time here. So if we looked at open chords, starting real simple, we'd have E, A, C sharp minor, and B. And now Bob certainly plays open chords all the time, but more commonly he would use a thing called the cage system, which is just a way of thinking about shapes. If you don't know what that means, it's just an acronym for open chord shapes. So C, A, G, E, and D, and then the minor equivalents. So say we take this shape right here, A. If we played it like this, you imagine kind of like this, you take that shape, move it up here, 7th fret here, so it's an E. That would be an E in the A shape, right? Here would be an A in the E shape. All right, so say we did over here, E in this C shape, right? This is a tricky one, people often avoid it, but Bob uses this a lot. And then you just stayed in one position, E, A, C sharp minor in the A minor shape, and then B in the G shape. You can play all those chords right there. And now this is a tough one to get the whole, shape. But Bob would often just play pieces of it, and we'll look a little later about how he would play around this shape a lot, doing some kind of cool fills and things. But you can see how you start to do these different shapes, and it really opens it up. So that's more like a Bob approach. One of my favorite quotes from Bob is, "I don't know if I discovered I had any talent. It was dogged persistence. I had to have the music." Now that's a great reminder that when we listen to a lot of our favorite players, we think that, oh, they're just naturally that good and that's it. But no matter how much natural talent they have or don't, they worked hard and they just kind of kept at it. So if you're ever feeling frustrated with your own playing, just remind yourself, you just got to keep at it and keep trying to focus on improving and learning as much as you can, and you will get there, So let's look at another thing of breaking up chords. So a thing Bob would do a lot is a thing called triads. So if we take that C shape right here, we just play this right here. That right there, that's called a triad. And just like tri, meaning three, it's 3-note chord, and it's the building blocks of all chords. So if we play this right here, our open E, these 3 right here, this is what they call a root position triad, because the root is on the bottom of E. You have E, G sharp, and B, right? Those are the notes that make up an E chord. Now, if we flip that around, it's called an inversion. Then we have G sharp, B, and E. So that G sharp on the bottom, that makes it a first inversion. You're flipping it around. And if you do it again, a second inversion, you've got B, E, and G sharp. And then you can go back to the root position. So you get those 3 different versions of it. And that really opens things up. So you can move around more easily, get more melodic. And notice how the sound of each one is. This one's very restful. It'd be a good one to end the song if you wanted to make it sound really resolved. This one kind of is pushing forward a little bit, and this one really, pushes a lot. So they each have a different kind of energy to it, And I used to think that, you had to play chords as is. So if you saw an E, then you go like this. But you can do anything like that. You can do it like this. I used to think that the root had to be in the bottom, but it doesn't, because, like think about Phil. He would just be laying it down the root all the time. That's all he did, just lay down the root. No, I'm just kidding. He was playing all over the place. He was a really unique bass player, but still, he'd be revolving around the root. Typically, you have that, right? So if you're playing this by yourself, it may sound a little different, but in the band with a bass player, if you're hearing that E, you don't have to have the E in the bottom. It really opens things up, frees things up. It was a great moment when I realized that. Now, aside from this, a non-musical thing that we can really learn from Bob that I like is that he was super humble. He's a real team player. You know, he's not putting up all-star numbers every night, but he's pivotal to a team's success, you know, and he's exactly who I want on my team because he makes everybody else play a lot better and he glues it all together. So another great quote from Bob was, the same song on a different day was a different song. Now, another great way of changing that up and making it different every time you play it is altering the chords. So again, we don't have to play chords as is when we see it. So we're gonna do a thing I call a lightning round. So we're gonna move real fast through these ideas of how Bob could change up the chords. So first one is sliding into a chord from 1 fret below. So we'd often do that. Right, so slide around. Another thing he would do is throw in 6th between the chords. So he'd have, right? Now, let's try something else on acoustic. Now let's listen to an example of how he played single notes between chords. All right, let's head back to the electric. Now, one thing Bob would do a lot is doing these things I call Hendrix fills, kind of between chords. And it wasn't something Hendrix came up with, but it was something he did a lot of and kind of took it to another level, was very influential with it. And Bob would do it as well. And now you could just take this spot right here and do the pentatonic, so the E major pentatonic scale, and just kind of notes from that, or on that shape right there. You can do 3 strings, 2 strings at a time. People call that double stops or whatever. And sometimes just single notes, but then he knows other places like here, down the C shape, right? And that's it. Now, Bob would often color his chords in different ways. So let's look at 3 different ways he would do it. If you have a major minor chord, he would often add notes on top and add a 6th or a 7th. So in this example, let's say on the B, it'd be very common to add a 7th there. Play it as a B7. Right? It gives you a certain color. Maybe it's kind of like a red, it's kind of a sound, a color, a vibe. You know, you could throw on that 6, things like that. But really mix it up, jazz it up. Now, one he uses a lot is playing sus chords, either a sus2 or a sus4. So if you take that E right here, if you just add this note right here, it gives you a real kind of cool, I think of like a cool blue sound, or a sus2. So this note right here is a 3rd. You can either bring it up to a 4th, or bring it down to a 2nd. It gives you a real spacey sound. So another way Bob would color chords is kind of a gospel approach where he would play a different chord over a different root. So for example here, in E, he might play an A, right? So if I play an E here, you can kind of hear that sound. It actually gives you a little bit of sus sound. There, you might slide into it. He would do that stuff all the time. So again, remember, we can break outside the box and play different chords in different situations. You don't have to match everything up perfectly. And now that the storm is clearing, let's look at another thing that we can learn from Bob that's hard to put your finger on, is that no matter what you do, all this stuff we've just looked at, it doesn't mean anything if you don't play it tastefully. He was so tasteful in everything he did. And that just takes time to develop your taste and just try things out, dive into it and realize, maybe you don't like that, but you like this other thing, and you keep working on that. So let's look at jamming. If you were kind of staying what they call a modal situation, just jamming over one chord, there is so many things we can do here, but let's just focus in on one thing, a thing called quartal harmony, which is like this. It's really spaced out sound. Bob once said, what I like about music is when time goes away. This is a great kind of chord to kind of just give it that timeless feeling. Now, how did Bob come up with this? Well, he didn't. Now, Bob learns a lot from other instruments, and in particular, piano, and in particular, a jazz pianist called McCoy Tyner, and he played in John Coltrane's band from about 60 to 65, and pretty much just as influential as Coltrane was to saxophone, he was to piano. And I had already studied his approach quite a bit because I went to school for jazz, so it's standard stuff. And we're going to look at just some things that Bob took away from there. And that is a difference of playing closed chords versus open chords, and there's different ways he would get this kind of open sound, but one is a thing called quartal harmony, and it ends up giving you these sus sounds, and if that's confusing to you and stuff, don't worry about it, just listen to how it sounds, right? So it's kind of more normal, kind of this spacey open sound, right? So that sound is really, really out there. So we've been looking at a lot of different ways of playing chords, and I haven't mentioned yet that these are called different voicings, and that just comes from classical times with choral music, where you have a conductor specifically telling people to say, you sing this, you sing that, and so on, and then be like, oh wait, actually, can you sing that instead, and this and that? So you're literally changing up the voices that are singing what notes. So with guitar, you can be like, okay, this is one voicing of an E, this is a different voicing. It's the same notes, but just rearranged in a different way. Now, Bob would also take this further with not only being specific about the voicings he'd play, but the voice leading, and that is thinking even further about how chords link up. So he might take a chord like this, and then he'd think, okay, now I'm going to play the A like this, so that the bottom note is the same note. That's a, kind of gluing it together. So your voice leading, maybe the C sharp minor then goes into B like this. Got this movement in the bottom going up. Maybe he plays the B like this, which is playing that G shape, but with the G right there. I didn't mention that before. That's a Bob shape he would do a lot. Like he did this or this. Another one that I didn't mention is he plays his major chords like this. Let's say he did it for E. It's not uniquely him, but not that many people do this. And he would do it a lot. So it's a little bit of a his own thing. So you play the root, the third, the root, and the third. You do it often in slower tunes, something like, Ramble on Rose and things like that. But, none of this stuff means anything with the voice leading or any of that stuff if you try to force it. You got to do it, again, tastefully. I remember a lot of things. I used to learn some jazz tricks with these chords and this and that, and then I'd try to do it. And I'd be like, oh, that kind of worked. And then some of the times, it just didn't work. So you have to really take your time and get really familiar with the way it sounds and feels in your hand and make it a part of you. And then you can kind of integrate it and make it more musical. And now, how would Bob make any of the things he played sound so natural? It's through listening. So you get ideas and inspiration from the other players, especially while jamming and taking it out and having it be a little more free. It's not about just doing any of these musical tricks. It's about listening to what everybody else is doing and kind of following them, and other times kind of leading them, but just listening so that you're part of a whole team. Now, this stuff also means nothing if we don't develop what we play. So none of this means anything. I would say the most important thing any guitarist can get from Bob's approach is how he develops his playing so much, especially during the jams. So he doesn't just play things as is and repetitively. He develops it and he gets ideas from listening. And he knows where to go from listening to the others in the band. Now, you don't need to know all these musical skills to be able to develop. You just need to try it. Start with something simple and just focus on having some forward momentum, and it will change your playing so much and change the playing of other people around you play with. So we focused a lot on Bob's approach to playing chords, but remember that there's much more to his playing, things like rhythm and tone and so much more that we can learn from and apply to our own playing. But make sure that you're more mindful of how you play your chords, and remember, you don't have to get locked into any one way, but above all, focus on developing your playing. Just take something real simple and try to make it go on a journey to another place. And if you want to know more about Bob's approach from all these things, diving deeper, check out this playlist right here, Bob's Chords. I got a whole bunch of videos diving deep into each tune where we go into the same stuff here, plus a whole lot more. So check it out, find a tune that you like, watch it, grab your guitar, and apply this stuff and make it your own.
We're both working.
Wow, he really analyzed Bob's style.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it's important to, so many of them, it's not all about Bob, but it's just, they are all things that Bob does, but they are
it's appreciation of
exactly appreciation of putting all those things together.
Approach that Bob took towards like when he said, just listen, that piece of advice. you know, Lord Ace in the chat was talking about, like, you know, I'm exploring. That piece of advice there is what it's like when you're just kind of feeling out chords, feeling out notes, feeling out direction. Don't necessarily have to know any theory. You're just exploring the sound. And that's some of the funnest music.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things is don't be afraid to just explore. Don't be afraid to just make sounds.
Can't be afraid to hit a note. You won't know whether it works or not until you do.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, little kids absorb so quickly or are able to progress very quickly a lot of times because of the fact that they're not afraid to just bang on stuff. And then, you know, when things don't sound the way they want them to, they bang on different stuff or bang on different, and it starts to sound the way they want it to.
They're not held back by some of that theory. I mean, I've said it many times, music theory, when I learned it young. It screwed up I became a songwriter after learning music theory, and it was a lot harder to try to write songs when you're thinking all these rules and all this theory. It got in the way of my songwriting. I literally spent a decade forcing that music theory out of my brain
at the same time,
just so I could find my sound.
If you didn't have that theory in the first place, then it could be that you might have written 10 years worth of songs that were just not musically sound.
Yeah.
They were not, you know, going to
I would have been more experimental. In the 80s, when I got my first keyboard, had no
could be
theory,
great, but it could be.
It was just banging on keys.
Right. Yeah. And that's where it all starts, you know?
Now, after finally learning to go explore my sound, having the theory, I can appreciate it now.
Yeah.
It got in my way at the beginning of songwriting.
And for me, one of the big things is when somebody else is playing and I want to try to figure out what they're doing is I'm listening for the lowest note that they're playing. And then I'm just going to try to find it.
Yeah.
And I don't care if I hit a wrong note. Like I'm not trying to play like a melody along with them right now. I'm not trying to play something perfect, you know, without even knowing what key they're in. I'm just trying to find them, right? And like once I can find that first note or find some notes that work, then I can figure out, okay, figure out a pentatonic that's going to work in their neighborhood, right? Like, and figure out something where I can make that work for whatever song it is. And then you can, you know, whether you want to just put in a slight lead line or, you know, melody line or be able to just find the actual chord tones, they're all in there in a pentatonic for
or
that works.
That one note that's kind of standing out, like when he was talking about the sus chords.
Yeah, yeah.
The two and the fourth. I could hear it, like, you know, the little resonating note that was behind the chord, and it clicked for me, like, oh, that's the purpose of the sus chords.
And for me, the translation is to the C, because from the C, if you go to a C sus and a C sus 4 and a C sus 2, it's just taking that from the E to the F to the D and back to the E, and that's just basically bringing in that 4 and the 2. And in each case, when you're going to play either the 4 or the 2, you're going to not play the 3, but you are going to play the 1 and the 5.
I think that's one of the Van Halen songs.
Yeah, that's in there, definitely. I think it drops down to something else.
Yeah, one of the Sammy Hagar ones. Take you.
I was hearing actually that sounded like Journey even there for a second.
Oh yeah, it could be Journey too. Highway runs.
That's the one I was hearing. Yeah.
It's like, funny how, like, you know, you can see so many songs in one progression.
I love the way that works. And it's a beautiful piano sound that you have there as well. I definitely enjoy that.
No, it's the reason
especially
why
those
I
deeper
spent
notes.
$3,500.
And actually, that was yeah, not bad. Again, this is the Casio, so I do like it. Now we have one. We were talking just earlier about Nare Soul, right? And some of the videos that we've watched with her. This one is.
Oh, I've learned so much from her. as far as like real music appreciation.
Yep. For this one, it's composing classical music to fit Billie Eilish's vocals. What do you think?
And I love that she thinks like a, classical music enthusiast, because that's where I came from. That was my first lessons in music.
Yeah. And she's, just fantastic technique on the piano as well. Just watching her practice and like watching what she'll just, what she can just knock out in a few minutes. Like, oh my God.
I know, she makes it look like
I need to definitely
natural.
sit down and play more. But let's see how this one. It looks like it's starting with Time Machine. We're gonna take a time machine. But I think this is to put together Billie Eilish and some classical composers in a time machine, or using a time machine to get us where we're going. Let's see.
We had a special time machine that allows us to send a clip of music to any composer back in history. Today, let's do this with Billie Eilish's song Happier Than Ever and see what these 5 classical composers might end up composing around it. Billie Eilish is an artist that I really love and respect, and I got pretty excited when I recently discovered that there is classical music embedded within her latest album, in her track Goldwing. The intro comes directly from Hymn to Vina by Gustav Holst. It's a part of his choral hymns from the Rig Veda, a work he wrote in the 1910s that was inspired by ancient Sanskrit text. So it's pretty amazing that all of these modern day listeners are getting to experience a little bit of classical music through Billie Eilish, whether or not they're aware of this. So now I thought it might be fun to flip the scenario a bit and imagine what it would be like if a bunch of classical composers came across Billie Eilish's music. I think the perfect song to do this with is Happier Than Ever, especially the opening section. The track itself is very unique because later on it turns into this bold punk pop rock type track. But when focusing on the opening, the melody is just as lyrical and full of chord changes as any classic song out there. And I'm really inspired by the way that Billie Eilish is singing this.
When I'm away from you, I'm happier than ever.
Her voice is beautifully fragile and whimsically distant while also being resonant and soulful. The character of her vibrato is also very special and ever-changing.
Give me a day or two.
I also really love how she's timing her notes in a very delicate manner, almost like draping her notes over the pulse.
To write myself a letter to tell me what to do.
And I think when we isolate her voice, we can use all of these details and nuances to make her singing fit against a new set of notes in a completely new context. And now back to our time machine, we're going to send out the first 20 seconds of Billie Eilish's vocals and see what each composer adds to it. How about we let the machine decide where we're going to send it to first? Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Now for Mozart, opera is a very important aspect of all of his music. You hear characters within different phrases, almost like they are talking to each other. There's contrast there. And listening to the lyrics, I think he will identify this as maybe being in a minor key. There's someone in distress.
When I'm away from you, I'm happier than ever. Wish I could explain it better. I wish it wasn't true.
Frédéric Chopin. Not to be too cliched, but maybe he'll hear this as a waltz in 3.
When I'm away from you, I'm happier than ever. Wish I could explain it better. I wish it wasn't true.
Franz Schubert. His music is so warm and romantic, full of embrace, and he might take a slower Sergei Rachmaninoff. His music is full of passion, it's quite impulsive sometimes, it's thick sounding, and the pace is very wavy.
When I'm away from you, I'm happier than ever. Wish I could explain it better. I wish it wasn't true.
Eric Satie, a very eclectic composer. I think he'll respond quite specifically to the color of her voice, the fragility of it. It'll sound very calm, pensive, resonant, full of space. Those were 5 composers from the past. Now I want to switch gears and end with a version that is more in line with my personal vision for the song. Again, I really love it, and I love Billie Eilish's voice, and I think it's perfect the way it is. But in the spirit of reimagining it, I thought it might be neat to come up with a version that is using strings, harp, and glockenspiel. So here it is. I hope you enjoy it.
When I'm away from you, I'm happier than ever. Wish I could explain it better. I wish it wasn't true. Give me a day or two.
Let me know in the comments which version you prefer, and I'll also make available extra versions of this excerpt to my patrons on Patreon. And please subscribe if you haven't already for content related to music and the styles of different composers. I have different videos that dive way deeper into the subject than I did in this video. And thank you for watching. I'll see you very soon.
Nareso, she has just a fantastic way of redoing some of those songs and reintroducing some of those ideas. And I love the way that she does like the little pop-ups on, showing which aspects of what she's changing are characteristic or definitive to that particular composer's style. The way that, because they really do, they sound so much different.
Yeah.
And each one does sound like they could really have come right out of that that era.
Her presentation approach there, that in 10 minutes, I learned more than I would have in a 3-month course on composers. She actually clicked in a few things, because I have studied every one of those composers, trying to figure out like what made them them. Her analysis is amazing. Like when you can hear and see it on the screen at the same time, in real time, you understand what that technique really is. And she was spot on with every one of those composers.
And I'm gonna have to watch that like a number of times again, just to like kind of really break down each of the composers, to kind of again more thoroughly digest that style. Because to be able to just sit down and like, again, she just made 5 completely new songs out of something that was already a good song, and it's 5 completely new great songs.
And she did reinterpret them from the mind of that composer.
Exactly.
I love these artists on YouTube that get into like an artist's head. You guys have shown me a couple of guys on YouTube that how to make a solo in the like Jimi Hendrix, and these guys who can get into the head of that musician and then make something based on that musician's skills or technique.
Big fan for sure. And again, with the way that she breaks those things down and the way that she can play and the way that she, very, very, thoroughly lays it all out. I
completely understands. She understands the subject matter.
You should definitely check her page out for sure.
Oh yeah. Anybody who,
you can learn a lot.
Anybody who's wanting to learn what music is at a deeper level, her videos and her perception of music really teaches you a lot. Her perspective on emotion in music alone blew my mind. has changed the way I'm looking at the piano these days.
Yep. And definitely there's so much to do and so much, to be able to do. Because I used to sit down, and again, I never considered myself somebody who could improvise very well at all. So when I took piano lessons as a kid,
You're so damn good at it these days.
Well, thank you. When I was a kid,
did you make yourself better at it because you didn't feel like you were good at improv?
Not even so much that. I think it was more just when I wasn't so good at it, it was more that I just didn't know what to play. It's like I'd love to. I know how to play scales, I know how to do this, but I didn't know how to not sound like I'm just playing scales or just specifically playing the same thing that I heard somebody else play. Because to me, it was more about mimicry. It was more about I can hear it and I can reproduce it, and that's the way it was with the classical piano. Like I could, if I was studying a piece, like I could bring it home. I could be struggling through to sight read the piece because I wasn't very fast at sight reading when I was a kid. Working my way through it and trying to, work my way through the piece. And then, dad could come home and like read it and sight read it the first time through straightforward. And
it's the stuff your dad was playing. Clearly your dad was skilled.
He was. He spent like, years, mastering that. So like even as a teenager, he was already able to, play from memory, pieces like I think you were talking about Moonlight Sonata or something, some pieces that are, 15 pages long or what have you. And he's playing it from memory as a teenager. But it was basically the ability to do that sort of thing. But even when he was 80 years old, he still couldn't improvise. Like he still would tell you straight up, like if I told him to just play me something in A, like he could play an A chord, but he wouldn't be able to play something convincingly.
It takes a different musical skill. It's like the difference between, say, somebody who can say a good joke on paper and somebody who can stand up and do it in front of a crowd.
Sure.
And
different skill set,
make jokes on the fly. Improvising is a difficult creative skill no matter what art form you're talking about. Being able to pull it out in real time. Mm-hmm. And you can't beat yourself if you're not good at improvising. You can't beat yourself up too much about it. I mean, I wish I was better at improvising. I'd play more jazz. I'd do more blues. If I ever get better at it.
And that's the thing is,
those are the genres I'm going to try to get better at.
Rather than focusing on trying to get better at, then, try to focus on just doing it, because just doing it is the way to get better at it. So,
and again, finding your sound. Because I notice you go like in phases as you're learning something. Yeah. Your first phase is to figure out what is getting played, what notes. And then the second time you attack it, you start putting yourself into the part.
Yep,
and that's when we get the filler notes and the groove, and also the Glenn groove.
The important thing is also where in the song process I am, or I should say where in the process the song is, in terms of, is it just one part now? It's just guitar and the title and I'm adding to it, or is it already 7 parts and I'm just adding a bass line on top of something that's already kind of full and laid down? That'll definitely affect what I play also. And if it is very open and it is just guitar and me adding bass, it helps if I know what is going to be in the song. Like, what other layers am I expecting? Because if I'm only expecting one other thing, then I'm going to keep it pretty busy. But if I'm expecting 3-4 more parts, I want to keep it pretty sparse so that there's a lot of room for everything else to happen. Otherwise it's too busy. Because if I just took something that already had guitar on it, added bass to it, and I added as much bass as it feels like it needs right now, I'm not anticipating the parts that are to come, and I'm not leaving room for them. They're going to try to play, and there's just no space for them to kind of wheeze, or the parts they play are going to conflict with some of the things that I'm doing because, they weren't lined up together at the start, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if there's multiple people working on a song like that, it helps for communication, especially the songwriter or writers, kind of like explaining what they're looking for. This whole jumping on something with no definition, it's not to say that I can't do it, but more times than not, I'm wondering what the songwriter's trying to do if I'm going to jump on a track with them.
Yeah.
These challenges are really going to teach me how to get better at improvising, figuring out what needs to be done without being told, like, I'm looking for this part or this instrument.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's tricky, and that's where,
you don't want to guess if you don't have to.
Well, that's the thing is I've gotten to embrace the guessing, I suppose, because it depends on. I've had kind of a contrast between the two different bands that I've been in for over a decade. Is that the Jersey band versus the Pennsylvania band? Is that one is much more like when we're going to go have rehearsals in Pennsylvania, it's like we usually know what we're going to be playing, like or we have an idea, like we're going to try to work on these 3 songs and do some other stuff, and we might do
you have a
random things
mission
while we're there, but we have
you,
a mission.
you have a jam mission.
And when we're in Jersey, it's more we get together and then we just kind of on the fly, like, what are we going to do? And we just kind of go into stuff. And a lot of times, like, I could be halfway through a song and not even know what song we're playing, but I'm just kind of reacting to what changes I hear coming.
That's the nice thing of like getting to jam in a room together. You are so lucky that you get to do that once in a while. It's been like 20 years since I've had a band room.
Yeah. I almost went today, but actually we rescheduled for Sunday. So we're going to do it Sunday. And that was good, actually, because I had been sanding some ceilings today. So I've got like stuff in my eyes and just had my arms over my head for most of the day. So that's better to put that off till Sunday. But it was definitely enjoyable stuff. One thing I wanted to go through, I think maybe we have time for one last video.
We got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a shorter one. This one's it's an 8-minute video. So, or no, wait. 5 minutes 51. I'll talk fast. Yeah. It's a 6-minute video. Jazz piano chords. Now this one, it does get into some complicated jazz chords, but the focus I want to talk about is the fact that it's talking about a progression, a 1-4-3-6-2-5-1 progression. So it's going through all those chords. So it's using all the chords, all 6 of the chords that we talked about before. We're leaving out the 7, setting him aside. But we're using everything in the 1 through 6.
Seventh is the loneliest number in a key.
I sense a song coming there, absolutely. And that's where this is some jazz piano chords. So we're going to try to get that cranking here. And once again, we appreciate everybody coming out. We'll probably cut shortly after this and get ready for Soulmake to start electronic Thursday evening or Friday afternoon, as it were, wherever he is.
Those were some great tips on each one of those. I feel like it's Tuesday, except I got the whole tip.
Nice. All right, which I have one more here, and this is from Piano Groove, and this is, Piano Groove is the YouTube channel. It should be about the same volume. Let's give that a try.
In this lesson, I'm going to show you a beautiful solo piano chord progression that can be used for introductions to jazz standards. We are playing in the key of E flat major today, so first let's play the scale. Now this progression uses the diatonic 7th chords, however we make a few tweaks to the chord qualities to add some more interesting colours and flavours. Let's first run through the regular diatonic 7th chords before we make any changes. The 1 chord in E flat major is E flat major 7, the 2 chord is F minor 7, the 3 chord is G minor 7, the 4 chord is A flat major 7, the 5 chord is a B flat 7, the 6 chord is a C minor 7, the 7 chord is a D minor 7 flat 5, and then we're back to E flat major 7. This progression starts on the 1 chord, so we start with E flat major 7. And then we go to the 4 chord, but instead of playing a major 7, we play a dominant 7. And I also add the 13 here. So that's an A flat 13. This dominant chord then wants to resolve either a 5th down or a half step down. A half step down is G minor 7, which is the 3rd or the diatonic 7th chord off the 3rd degree. But again, we're not going to play this as a minor chord, we're going to play it as a dominant chord. And I'm also going to add the sharp 5 and the sharp 9, which gives it a lot of extra colour and tension. So far we have E flat major 7, the 1, to A flat 13, the 4 dominant, to a G7, sharp 5, sharp 9, so 3 dominant. And then we go to the regular 6 chord, so C minor 7. The 2 chord would be an F minor 7 in the key of E flat major, but I'm going to play another dominant chord. Here we have an F13, so you see the 13 and the 9s here. And then I'm going to come up and I'm going to play the 9 here. And then I'm going to go to a B flat 13 voicing with the flat 9. So you could also look at this as a G triad over a B flat 7 shell. And then I'm going to go up and hit, again I'm going to hit the same notes, the G octave, but an octave higher. So let's listen to how that sounds. And then we can go into a tune, for example, Misty. So this exact progression can be used to approach any jazz standard that starts on the tonic. Of course we're in the key of E flat here, but you can transpose those voicings. And in fact, in the PDF download below this video, you can download this progression in all 12 keys. So finally, I will show you a few variations and we will use it as an intro for another tune in the key of E flat major. So I hope you've had fun with this lesson. If you're interested in more cool progressions and jazz standards, head over to pianogroove.com where we have lots of courses on this kind of stuff. Remember to take the PDF download below. You can find this exact progression in all 12 keys. So that means whatever jazz standard you're working on, you can find a cool progression to add at the start. I hope you enjoy practicing this stuff and that it brings you some enjoyment in your playing, and I will see you next time.
And I just love that that's, kind of little lullaby, little jazz stuff going on there.
Yeah, over
Very
the
cool
rainbow.
stuff. Over the rainbow, yeah, exactly.
That was some great stuff, man.
Yeah. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. And I believe we're going to hand over. So we have Soul Make.
Oh yeah, it's time for Electronic Thursday.
Actually
on Friday.
On Friday. Always good. But thanks everybody. And Soul, hope you're all good here. And we'll get Ange coming out here and get things started for you.
Night Band Lab, thanks for the jam. And Lord Ace, if you want to learn some of those tools, just send me a message.